Hey everybody, welcome to today's live summary of class on September 29th. Couple of announcements to get us started. Just another reminder that the first grading period is ending on 10/8, so check your grades and turn in any missing work ASAP. Also, there's a lot going on in our community right now with the decision around the Breonna Taylor case, social justice and protest movements, COVID-19, and so many other things. So I'm going to be hosting a town hall meeting on Wednesday at 2 p.m. This town hall meeting is totally optional. It's a safe place for you guys to come discuss current events and your feelings. You're welcome to come and listen. You're welcome to come and participate. Or if you're not comfortable coming, that's also okay. I'm also happy to talk with you one-on-one. And I just reminded everybody of our class rules of respect. You guys are doing great work around that. Today's supporting question is, how did colonizers justify the institution of slavery? We looked at three key ways that slavery was justified: economic, political, and social. Colonizers justified the enslavement of African people in various ways, none of which are morally right. So it's important to remember that even though colonizers are using these reasons to justify slaves, they are not morally right. So today, again, we're going to look at economic, political, and social justifications for slavery. To warm us up, we took a look at a poem. I'm going to read the poem aloud, then I want you to pause the video and sit and reflect for a few minutes about how this poem makes you feel, what it makes you think about, and how it connects to the background knowledge that you already have. Poem, August 1619, by Clint Smith. Over the course of 350 years, 36,000 slave ships crossed the Atlantic Ocean. I walk over to the globe and move my finger back and forth between the fragile continents. I try to keep count how many times I drag my hand across the bristled hemispheres, but grow weary of chasing a history that swallowed me. For every 100 people who were captured and enslaved, 40 died before they ever reached the New World. I pull my index finger from Angola to Brazil and feel the bodies jumping from the ship. I drag my thumb from Ghana to Jamaica and feel the weight of dysentery make an anvil of my touch. I slide my ring finger from Senegal to South Carolina and feel the ocean separate a million families. The soft hum of history spins on its tilted axis. A cavalcade of ghost ships wash their hands of all they carried. Some things that we talked about in class today are how this poem makes us realize the distance and the trauma that people experienced as they were captured and enslaved in Africa and forced to board ships over to the Americas. We talked about how history has tried to wash its hands of what was carried on these ships, but we can't forget. The soft hum of history spins on, but we have to remember. We also talked about how so many people were swept up in this movement against their will. This poem invoked a lot of strong emotions for a lot of people and a lot of reflection. And Clint Smith, as the descendant of these people who were forced over on the slave trade, you can hear his words and how deeply they resonate within him. In August of 1619, a ship arrived in Point Comfort, Virginia, carrying more than 20 enslaved Africans, the first on record to be brought to the English colony of Virginia. They were among the 12.5 million Africans forced into the transatlantic slave trade, their journey to the New World today known as the Middle Passage. So just an important reminder before we go on, our language matters, the impact of our language matters, so we're using the term enslaved person instead of slave. Calling someone a slave takes away their humanity, and we want to focus how all these people of the past were in fact people. So we'll be saying enslaved person instead of slave. And another reminder that legal does not equal moral. From the very beginning of slavery, people of all backgrounds resisted and fought against slavery. It was legal, but it was never moral. And I want you to be aware of bias, especially when learning about historically marginalized people. We need to be aware of bias in our sources and be critical of our sources. So our first passage that we looked at is the Middle Passage, and that's the name for the journey taken by 12.5 million Africans forced into the transatlantic slave trade. The next passage can be a little triggering and traumatic for some people, so if you need to take a minute and step away after the passage, please take some time to step back and reflect on what we're learning. The Middle Passage. The voyage itself took between 6 and 8 weeks. The enslaved Africans were chained together by the neck, hand, and foot, wearing sometimes the most uncomfortable and miserable gear. They were packed into the smallest places where there was barely enough room to lie on one side. It was here that they ate, slept, urinated, defecated, gave birth, went insane, and died. They had no idea where they were going or what was happening to them. Within these ships, Africans from different countries, regions, cultures, and with different languages learned to communicate with each other. Many conspired to overthrow their captors together. So here we see the ways that the Middle Passage dehumanized people. The way that from immediately being forced onto the ship, people lost their freedom, they lost their humanity, and they faced insurmountable and unbelievable challenges and trauma through this time period. But we also talked about how within the ships, people came together to communicate with one another, to communicate together, to lift each other up, to help each other through, to be support for each other, to share things with each other, and to build what they could of community among themselves. And in conspiring to overthrow their captors, from the very beginning, they fought against the systems that were holding them in bondage. They didn't peacefully or passively go into this, they fought back from the very beginning. Then we looked at a map that shows the transatlantic slave trade. You can see in this map the red lines coming out of Africa are the ships carrying enslaved people into the New World. In the New World, they're met by tobacco, coffee, cotton, sugar, mining, rice, and these are all of the cash crops. So what we have happening is an elite group of people working under the system of mercantilism, where their number one objective is to make money no matter what. They have these potential cash crops where they could make enormous amounts of money back in Europe. But in order to do so, they need a large labor force to make these natural resources productive and financially viable. So what they do is they justify taking in those 21st enslaved Africans here in Virginia to start the process of slavery in the New World. They justify using that free labor, forcing people to labor in a way that they can support themselves to make more money. I want you to answer this open-ended question about two things you learned from studying that map. So if you need to take a little time and study the map at more length during the Nearpod activity, you can go back and forth and look at the map again and try to pick out two things that you can learn. So what the map tells us is that the system of mercantilism, the need for producing these natural resources, allowed colonizers to justify enslaving Africans to be that labor force. We'll now watch a short video of how and why slavery in the colonies changed. We're not going to play the video in this YouTube, but what I want you to do is work through this video while you're working through the Nearpod at the same time so that I'm helping you get through that lesson. When you get to this point, you'll pause my video and play the video in your Nearpod experience. You'll answer the short quiz question. And what I want you to think about from the video we just watched is the idea that Elizabeth Key is a hero. She is fighting against an oppressive system from the very beginning. She sees a way that she can use the legal system to put forth her own rights, a way that she can get get her freedom for herself and her children. And she pushes that through the legal system and becomes a pioneer. And many, many enslaved African people follow her lead and use her as guidance on how to get their own slavery revoked and become free citizens. But unfortunately, what happens is that the people who have decision-making power in the colonies, that wealthy white landowning elite, ultimately change the legal system so that they can justify holding people in slavery. They make it so that slavery follows the mother, and your spiritual inclination, if you choose to convert to Christianity, no longer guarantees your freedom. So basically, they use the law to continue to justify holding people enslaved. Finally, social justifications. Europeans enslaved people long before colonization. Until the 1450s, European sugar planters in the Mediterranean imported enslaved laborers from parts of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Slavery was common in Africa and the Americas before European invasion. When Europeans arrived, most enslaved people in Africa and the Americas were war captives. In some societies, slavery could be socially alienating, with enslaved people considered as labor, prestige goods, or expendable. In other societies, enslaved people could integrate and even become people of power and influence. What we see in the Americas is the socially isolating system of slavery, where enslaved people are considered as labor, goods, and expendable. As a result of that, slavery in the colonies was different because it was based around the false idea of white supremacy. White supremacy was put forward as a way to develop a racial divide between people that's going to become so important in allowing the social justification of slavery. When one group of people sees themselves as superior to another, they're able to use that supremacy to rationalize and justify a lot of inequitable, unequal, and unfair treatment against the people that they view as inferior. And that's exactly what happened in the colonies. This develops into chattel slavery, which is an intergenerational system of slavery where individuals are held as property for as long as their enslaver demands. Over the next several units, we're going to look more and more at white supremacy and how that's used to develop the racial divide between people. You have a small homework assignment today on the Atlantic slave trade. You should watch this video and then complete the Google form. It's already been posted in your Google Classroom. Finally, I want you to complete the exit ticket, where you tell me one way that slavery was justified in the colonies, economic, political, or social, and explain it. So give me an example of that way. This is a really heavy lesson, and unfortunately, working my way through it during a short YouTube video, we're not able to get as deep or talk quite as much about the implications of some of the things that I've brought up today. I really encourage you to come to my office hours so that we can talk through this, because I want to make sure you really understand the way that slavery was institutionalized in the colonies. It's a very important part of American history, and it's important that we have a solid foundation for understanding the way it was justified, although never a moral system. All right, thanks guys, and I'm here to help if you have any questions. Have a good day. Bye.